everyone. This is going to be my last personal tale of just a weird occurrence that happened to me before I do another one, which is actually a group of really odd things that happened to me, and it's kind of hard to talk about those, and I've debated whether or not to do them or not, and I've decided to do them, but I don't know when I'm going to. But this is the last just kind of odd thing that happened to me that I can remember. And this one isn't really all that creepy, I don't think, but I do find it extremely bizarre. It was the summer of 1998, and I was in ROTC advanced camp. In a nutshell, what that is that is a summer course where they train you to become military officers, in this case Army, but really all it was kind of several weeks of Ranger School Light. It sucked. I have about 3 or 4 memories of it. This is going to be one of them. And I was prior service. I was enlisted. I was actively in the reserve still at that point. And previously that February, I had been at Fort Polk, Louisiana I only had my corporal stripes and I wasn't an E5 then, but I was an NCO and I was down there, and that was a blast. I loved that 3 weeks. This, not so much. At the time, I don't know where advanced camp is these days, but it was somewhere around Mount Rainier, and you do spend a lot of days and nights awake in the woods. I do remember those ant hills or termite hills, whatever they were, and getting constantly bit up by those things. But one day in particular was a little weird. What you would do often is sometimes they would take an individual and try to test their leadership abilities by putting them into a leadership position, and then you would be given a team, and some people would go play the bad guys or the enemy, if you will. Well, we were playing the enemy this day, and I don't remember when exactly it was in the whole thing. I do think it was close towards the end, but I could be wrong. So me and one other individual, and I remember his name to this day, although I don't talk to him, but we'll call him Rick. Me and him were playing snipers out in the middle of the woods in case anybody came down the trail. We were supposed to, we had our Miles gear on. I don't even know if that's still around, but we were supposed to, take them out, if you will. So we're out there, and maybe half an hour goes by. Then an hour, we're keeping quiet, talking low. Eventually we decided to separate, put some space between us a little bit. Now, even though an hour had gone by, this isn't unusual. It takes a while to get things going, so we didn't think much of it. But no one was around and we weren't hearing anything. We should have been hearing noise at this point. You're supposed to be tactical in the field, not make a lot of noise, but it doesn't always work that way, especially with a bunch of guys who are going to become officers. Not dinging them, as I was one for a while, but I digress. So we're out there and we're spaced, and all of a sudden this smell comes over us. Oh my God, it's horrible. I don't even know how to describe it. It was pungent. I don't want to say it was rotting flesh. Rotting flesh doesn't smell like this. It was just a really bad smell, and I've never smelled anything like this before or since, and I can't even describe it. The best thing I can think of is a combination of musty staleness and maybe a little bit of sulfur, but that doesn't even describe it correctly. But the smell wasn't all of it. We kind of just looked at each other. We didn't see any smoke or anything. It wasn't like CS gas, which actually doesn't have that much of a distinct smell or anything like that. We weren't being fake gassed or something like that. There was no smoke. It was just this odor in the air. And it was daytime, and it was a clear day, but we were in the woods, and we just kind of like snub our noses, and Rick kind of just, all of a sudden, he just kind of points, turns slightly and points, because we're still trying to be quiet. And at first I'm like, what? And I look up, and the sky is green. I mean green, like a bright neon green. And I knew instantly that's what he was pointing at. Nothing else was out of the ordinary other than that hideous, vile smell. And I'd never seen a sky like that. Now, sometimes there's forest fires in the area and ash gets in the air, but it doesn't look like that, at least not that I'm aware of. And earlier in the day, it wasn't like that. The sky was blue like it was supposed to be. And like I said, this was still daytime. Although the sun was going to eventually set in a couple of hours, but it was still fully day. And this was just really baffling to us. We didn't really know what to make of it, so we kind of just came back towards one another and kind of whispered to one another, what is going on? Is this some sort of thing? Have you heard of this? Is this some sort of game they're playing? And neither of us had any clue, and I had never heard of anything like this. So we're like, okay. All right. So at this point, it'd probably been closer to an hour and a half, and still no noise. At this point, we made what's called a command decision. The two of us decided we were going back. So we put the rifles on our backs and we started to head down the trail. Now, even though we were in the woods, the stuff there is laid out pretty well. I mean, it'd be really hard for you to get lost. And we go down the one trail, then we turn to get back on the other one, and we see the setup of the vehicle that was going to be used, and no one was there. At least we didn't see them. At this point, the smell had started to subside a little bit, but the sky color was still green, and the light coming in from the trees so kind of green, although our eyes had started to adjust to the color change a little bit. But no one was there, and that was odd. So we're like, okay, are we stumbling in the middle of this training exercise and we're going to botch it up? But at this point, we didn't care. We looked in the back of the vehicle. No one was back there. And we did start to hear stuff in the distance. And it was coming from a clearing area. It was an area where you do your after-action review, your AAR. So we figured it had happened. Nobody came by us to spring our trap, so we didn't need to. So we just kind of walked down there, and everybody was just kind of looking at us and nodded that we were back as if this was what we were supposed to do. So we just rolled with it, and it was an after-action review, and they went through it. We had just missed the whole thing, but I mean, they were loud. We should have been able to hear them from where we were. Here's the thing, that the sky at this point, once we came upon them, had turned back more of the typical color for maybe a couple of hours before sunset. So it looked normal again. And we just kind of brushed it off, and we did talk about it later that night briefly, and then we just went about our way. And, we figured that the smell was tied to the color of the sky, and it must have been local, and it must have been something. Somebody did something. But you got to remember, too, that you're sleep deprived when they do this to you. You're not in all of your faculties as it is. They intentionally do this to you. And, after you're sleep deprived for a certain amount of time, you do start to hallucinate. We did hear some odd noises when the smell and the light, but nothing that would really take our heads away from it, thinking it wasn't an animal. But when Rick mentioned it after we had gotten back, I started thinking about it and started thinking these noises kind of weren't animal-like either. But this could all be chalked up to us just hallucinating, but we saw the same thing. So that isn't likely. What is more likely is somebody was doing something, and we just happened to be at the edge of it. But in reality, I just don't know what happened.